Hi, everybody. Today I am going to be kind of going through my process of observation when it comes to my planner system. This is something I talked about recently in a couple of different places where I was discussing the stuff that's been working for me this year, the stuff that hasn't been working for me this year, and how I'm going to make decisions about 2023, especially in light of the fact that my life is changing pretty drastically now that I'm going on dialysis. I think observing myself, observing how this past year has gone in the context of previous years, and start thinking about what next year is going to look like. Now, this is something I have done in multiple different ways, but I'm doing it today with index cards and markers because this is when my brain is the most stressed out and the most frazzled. Index cards and markers seem to be the best way for me to clarify my thoughts. I actually have a video from years ago when I lived in Napa using index cards and markers to help me sort out some other stuff in my life having to do with work, and I can link that video down below. This is also not a video to tell you what planner to pick or how to pick a planner. I have talked about that in previous videos. I can leave that down below as well as a Skillshare class about finding planner piece, which I did a few years ago. You know, some of the things are a bit out of date in terms of like the planners specifically I was talking about, but all of the information there is still absolutely relevant. And there is a free trial if you don't have Skillshare already. Again, link down below. This is not meant to be a masterclass in how to pick a planner. This is meant to be a honing of a skill that I think is really helpful in both making your life easier as well as helping you avoid FOMO, shiny object syndrome, buying too much shit. This is a way to help you avoid some of that by observing yourself, by being honest with yourself, and really thinking about things before you make the plunge, before you let the influencers influence you into buying things, before you let all the new products influence you into buying things, looking to the first influence and the main influence that you should have, which is your own experience. So that's what we're working on today. So I just currently have a stack of index cards. Whoops, these are, I think from Baron Fig. I've had them for a long time, and they're my favorite to just pull out of my drawer. You don't need to buy fancy index cards. They sent these to me a long time ago, and I just love them. They're blank on one side, dot grid on the other. Any index card will do. Post-it notes too, but index cards seem to be my favorite for this, so that's what I'm using. I have some mild liners I'm going to use. I grabbed the neutral ones because I haven't really used these as much as I would have wanted to, and I'm feeling a neutral kind of day. And then I've got my Statler pigment liner. The supplies don't matter. Get yourself some index cards or some scraps of paper and some different color markers or highlighters and get to work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to create index cards for each of my planners or planning tools. And I want 2 of those cards for each one. We'll talk about what we're going to put on these in a minute, but the first thing, you just want to take all of your planners. Now, the way I'm doing this, for digital, that encompasses my ClickUp, my Google Calendar, any of like the note-taking apps I use online, anything that's like fully contained within the computer system, because for me, that's all just one sort of system. If you feel like you have a Notion and then you have a Google Calendar and you have something else, and those 2 feel like separate entities, by all means, split them up. But for me, all of my digital stuff sort of fits in one category because they all kind of just sort of mesh together in my mind. I will mention, you don't have to do index cards and pens. You can do this all online if you want to. I like writing things down. Jesse loves to use a whiteboard. He loves to just write everything on a whiteboard. You can get a big piece of butcher paper and just write on that. You can use a bullet journal or a notebook. Whatever works best for you, whatever you feel the most confident scribbling on. Another tip I'll give you in like a beginning tip for this is do this at a time when you have the chance to sort of sit down with a cup of coffee or with a cup of wine or whatever. It's a time when you can sit down and like kind of be open with your thoughts. Another thing you can do, this is kind of how I tend to do things like this, is I will start thinking about it in the shower. And then once I felt like I've done some initial thinking in the shower, that's when I actually come and start writing things down. I have actually been doing some thinking in the shower the past few days about this, aside from all the thinking I've been doing ahead of time. But really, I did gather my thoughts quite a bit. So Give yourself some space to think about it, whether all in one session or like showers for me are a fantastic place to do stuff like that, I will say. So for work HB90, I'm counting my HB90 planner stuff and then my Kanban board all in one category because, again, that's how it works in my mind. And then separately from my Kanban and my HB90 is the Moxie Life Daily inserts that I've been using. So one of the things I'm going to do also is take an additional index card for just general notes, general observations that are not tied to any given planner. And I can give you my first observation right now that 5 planners is too much for me. And I know this because I have tried using Hella planners before and it never works out. Even though these two are kind of one system together, that's still 4. That's still a lot. So let's start with the easiest for this. What I want to do is go ahead and take my cards for one of my planner systems. And I want to sit here and be honest with myself about what is working and what is not working for each of these systems. Actually, this will be an easy one, but it won't be a great demonstration one. So let's go with my Moxie Life vertical, okay? Let's talk about this guy right here. What works, what's not working. So if I'm thinking about what's working with my Moxie Life vertical, I'm going to sit and I'm going to think about it for a few minutes. When you stop to ask yourself what's working in one of your planners or what's not working, it can run the gamut. It can be practical things. A practical thing for me is that my Moxie Life, the thing I've been doing lately is using it for my daily to-do list, but limiting the amount of space. And that has kept my days a little bit more reasonable, which has helped with my mental health. So keeping my to-dos, my daily to-dos, in a limited space. That is something practical that is working for me in my Moxie Life vertical right now. Something that is more decorative, something that is more fun, hobby-oriented, because that's also something you can think about. You don't have to just think in terms of what's practical, what's useful, but what's fun, because that can also be useful. And I really, really love this particular layout for planning my week out. Like, I love being decorative every week in this planner. It is reinvigorating my joy of decorative planning. Another thing that comes from this, and this also can happen when you're making your observations, is once you've made one observation about yourself, it might trigger another observation. And the observation it's triggering for me with this one is that I also love being able to flip back through the planner and have it be mostly filled up. Like, I find that satisfying. Let's go to the what's not working. So a couple of things that are not working for me with my Moxie Life are that, for one, I started really great this year doing all of the weekly and monthly reflections, but as of this summer, as my health has really declined, I have actually just neglected them. I find them very valuable, but because I'm so exhausted, it's just one thing that slips my mind. It's not even that I don't want to or that I think about it and think, nah. I don't usually even remember they exist until I'm getting ready for my next month and I see it and I'm like, okay. And then the second one is I do great at setting up my weekly actions, but not so great at actually planning for them and doing them. Now, I have a solution for both of these things, but we're not there yet. Right now, it's just about observing. If you think of anything while you're writing this down that could potentially work to solve a problem, make it on your little side note. Just hang on to that set it to the side. Don't let it interrupt your stream of consciousness. Okay. So with that, I'm going to take a few minutes and just start working on these by asking myself the question, what's working, what's not working, being honest with myself, and filling out the back of these cards. There is no right or wrong when it comes to how much you write or how much you don't write. We'll talk about what we can draw from these observations in a minute, but right now is purely just you thinking about how you've been using things. If you need to actually grab your planner and flip through it to remind yourself of things, do that, but just write what comes to your head. Don't think about it too much. Just let anything out onto your observations that you can think about. One thing you can do before you really dig into your observations and start making like conclusions from them is to really look at them. Like, what do you see when you look at your various cards? For example, I look at my Moxie Life, and the Moxie Life has more positives than negatives. The negatives are all kind of, for the most part, related to each other. Okay? So that gives me some ideas. Do I keep this planner and just work on the problem that all those problems are related to? If I look at my Moxie Life Daily for work, it's the opposite. I have more negatives than positives about it. The positives seem to be related to each other. For example, I love it when I use it and the weekly layout is helpful, but sometimes it's too much. I waste paper, it's expensive, and it feels like a chore. Okay? So you do that with each of your planners, kind of take a look at them, see if there's themes that are popping up, see if you can even use highlighters, like if you notice that something is popping up across multiple things. As an example, with both my Moxie Life Daily and my bullet journal, feels like a chore. I wrote that exactly so I can grab a marker and highlight them in the same color so that I can see that there is a common thread between the two of them. And it's another way to kind of take your observations and tie them together. So once you have made your observations, once you have looked at them, looked for any themes, kind of pulled out any themes that you have, then you can go back, whether you made notes on your little side notes or not, and see if there's any solutions that are immediately obvious to you. They may have become obvious to you when you were creating your observations. They were for me. The easiest example is my Moxie Life vertical. So of my not working, one of them is the bump. And I already know an idea of what to do about that. So for this guy, I'm just going to take the same color and I'm just going to highlight the brown. And next to it, I'm going to write. So my thought is next year to plan for some different styles, maybe join in on some challenges, and incorporate my no spend by using stuff I've already got. That can help with the bump. But the other three, I think, are kind of related to each other. The first one is about how at the beginning of the year, I started strong with my reflections, but then as the year wore on and I started feeling shittier and shittier, I was not as consistent with them until I wasn't doing them at all. The second is that I'm great at setting my weekly actions, but not so great at actually incorporating them into my weekly plans, which is the whole point of having the goals and the plans in the same book. And then the third one is that sometimes I try to set too many habits at once and it demoralizes me. So the thought I had for these guys, kind of all together, right, is to put monthly reflections and weekly reflections on my actions, and then put my actions in my weekly planner. Make that part of my planning process, and then add a habit to check my actions daily. What that will do is it will create the habit of checking my actions daily, which will take up one of my habit spots so that I'm not filling it with something new. And by checking my actions daily, I will be continually refreshing them with myself. By making them part of my weekly plan, I've made space for them. And by adding my monthly reflection and my weekly actions into my actions, like whether it's personal or whatever, pick the category it fits into, have those things be one of the things to check off each week. That, I think, is a start. The habit thing is going to have to come more into my goal setting, but that is a start on how to fix that. Because everything else about this planner is making me really happy. If these are my main issues, I can stick with this planner, and these are just a way to fix it. So currently, a Moxie Life vertical seems to be fitting into my planner future with some adjustments. And so that's what you want to do. You want to look at these observations and you want to make some choices. I'm not going to do all of this right now with you because I don't want to do it while I'm on camera. I would like to actually stop and think about it. But I'm going to give you another example of an area something is not working and how you might wind up crossing the streams with some of your stuff. So for example, we had two kind of crossover comments that both my bullet journal and my Moxie Life Daily feel like a chore. So let's look at the Moxie Life Daily. I love it when I use it. The weekly layout is helpful, but sometimes it's too much. I waste paper and it's expensive. Sometimes I don't need it, right? I just want to make a to-do list. And then if you look at my bullet journal, for my positives, I love setting it up, and I actually love the act of writing in my bullet journal. But I'm not really a journaler. I don't feel like writing my feelings out very often. It's not something I'm into. I don't need the space for my personal life because I have plenty of room in my vertical planner, and it feels like a chore. So if you look at these, immediately a solution is beginning to come to the front. What if I dump the Moxie Life Daily and move my work into my bullet journal, and then on the weeks that I want to set it up, I set up the things I loved about the Moxie Life in the bullet journal, and on the weeks I don't, I just use a to-do list. So that's a thought. But this is not my only work planner. Then we have my HB90 planner. When I use the system, it works, and the Kanban is extremely helpful, but sometimes the weekly check-ins are overwhelming me. In general, I can get really quickly overwhelmed because there's just a lot. What if I use this same system in the bullet journal and just add the things that are working for me rather than copying the whole system into there? It's a thought. I don't know for sure if I'm going to do that yet, but these observations are kind of leading me down a direction. If that was the case, if I did decide to mush these all together, then suddenly I have my bullet journal, and my digital planning, and that's it. It brings it from 5 to 3. Do you see how you can use a process like this to help you sort through what you're doing? The key here is to be honest with yourself. That's the key. Nobody has to look at this but you. Nobody needs to know what these observations are. If there's just one planner you've been putting stickers in so you can post pictures on the internet and that's it, you can be honest about that. And that could be a what works or a what doesn't work, depending on how you feel. You might be totally fine with that. And so that would go on a what works card. You might think that that's wasteful and put that on a what's not working card. This is all just so that you can get all of your observations about yourself and how you've been planning out of your head and onto some paper, so that then you can use these cards to start shuffling them around and seeing what could be possible. One outcome of this is you could discover that nothing you're using is working and none of it feels good to you. And if that's the case, then you might take all these cards, keep the observations, but push them to the side and start with a new blank one and start thinking about the things that might work for you. And that's when I would recommend my old videos or going to my Planner Peace class, because that's not what this video is about. This video is entirely about the honesty you need to observe how things have been working for you, whether it's for the hobby of it, the practical of it, the all of it, and where you can make adjustments that will serve you best. Not the internet, not your family, you. Everything else is secondary to that because you're the one who has to deal with this shit. So I would love it if you try this out. You sit down with some index cards or your notebook or whatever and just sit, make some observations, and then observe the observations. See if there's trends, see if there's things that fit together, see if solutions become obvious to you like some of them did to me. At the very least, you wind up with a bunch of observations that can help you rule out stuff. If you do this, let me know in the comments. If you have other tips for observing how things are working for you, please leave them down below. If you do anything with this video, it's to pause before spending money on yet another planner, to stop and think, will this actually be something that could work for me, or am I buying it because it might be working for somebody else? Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, my dudes, peace.